All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our public hearing of the Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission. I am co-chair of this commission. I'm Kathleen Clyde, serving along with co-chair Greg Moore and vice chair of the commission, Janice Brock. We are coming to you today virtually, but focused on the Central Ohio region and getting input from citizens, leaders, elected officials about their thoughts on the importance of redistricting and on drawing fair districts. This is a volunteer commission made up of a diverse group of political leaders, former elected officials, scientists, nonprofit leaders, and people from all over the state of Ohio. We're very well represented regionally, and it's nice to wrap up our series of regional hearings with this focus on Central Ohio this evening. Just a reminder to folks who are not familiar with the commission, we are a model commission. We are developing a report and model district plans to submit to the official process. And we have been modeling what a good redistricting commission would look like, taking public input, going on the road, developing rationale, and engaging with the public and hearing what they think about redistricting, about ending gerrymandering in Ohio. And we're excited to continue that work here with this hearing tonight in Central Ohio. So again, welcome everyone. Thanks to the commissioners who are here. We will have a few more joining us soon. But for right now, I'm going to turn it over to co-chair Greg Moore to take the roll.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you again for all of you who've joined us tonight, all the commissioners who've been with us these last six sessions. And particularly thank you to all those who worked to get the special speakers that we have lined up for tonight. We thank you and appreciate that. And also thank you to the people who are testifying tonight. We really do appreciate your taking the time. If I could just take a personal privilege, it's been great to have these sessions before there was a Ohio Redistricting Commission. Now that that's formed, we are very hopeful that what we've been able to do these last 6 sessions, these last 4 months actually, can help inform that whole process as we go along. So I'm going to start with the commission roll call. And if you're here, please say your name. Barbara Sykes.
Present.
Thank you. Barbara Sykes also serves as the president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus that had their annual meeting today with Mr. Eric Holder.
Foundation.
I'm sorry. I'll leave it alone, but thank you.
Yeah.
Tom Roberts, are you here yet? For the NACP. Andre Washington with the A. Philip Randolph Institute. I'm sure they'll be joining soon. Katie Shanahan with All on the Line.
Here.
Thank you. Kathleen Clyde, co-chair.
Here.
Thank you. Greg Moore, I'm here. Janice Brock, OOC,
Here.
Vice Chair. Sam Gresham, the Chair of Common Cause. I think I saw Sam earlier. Sam, are you here?
Yeah, he's muted.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I see you.
I'm here.
All right, thank you, Sam.
Technology challenged, all right?
Key Butler, you're here.
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Thank you. Dr. Richard Gunther, are you here?
Here.
Chris Tabanor, are you here?
Present.
Lise Regular, are you here? Dr. Regular, are you here?
Here.
Jeremy Blake
Here.
from the Newark City Council. Dr. Ellen Greenbush, are you here with us?
Here. Yes.
There we go. Alan Bannister. Alan, are you here yet? All right. And Amina Barhini, are you here with us tonight?
I am here.
Thank you so much. We do have some commissioners who are going to come in, but we do have a quorum, Madam Co-Chair, and we're ready to begin.
All right. Thanks so much, Greg. Let's kick it over to our Vice Chair, Denise Brock, to give us a quick redistricting update.
Thanks, Chairwoman. Good evening, everyone. As she said, my name is Janice Brock. I'm from Akron, Ohio, and it's an honor to serve as the Vice Chair of the Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission. I want to extend a special thanks to all the co-chairs, commissioners, and speakers, and those of you all in the audience for your participation tonight. In tonight's hearing, redistricting is critical to our democracy, and I believe that it's the citizens who have the power to influence this process to secure fair maps. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with my volume here. Here we go. I want to give just a quick update, some quick updates about the redistricting process in general. The Ohio Redistricting Commission convened as of Friday, August 6, 2021. The members of that commission includes Governor DeWine, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, State Auditor Keith Faber, Senate President Matt Huffman, Senator Vernon Sykes, House Speaker Bob Cupp, and House Minority Leader Amelia Sykes. Today, we also had a special data release from the U.S. Census Bureau. So today at 1 p.m., the U.S. Census Bureau released the 2020 census data, and they explained that there would be a further analysis and an option for people to be able to use the data within the coming days. With a little bit of business about things that are happening in this commission, the Citizens Redistricting Commission, we are excited to announce that we've collected over 2,000 maps from around the state, and we're looking forward to more community input as we continue to do this work and continually to solicit input from the community. I just want to remind folks that the public submission portal is open. If you visit ohredistrict.org, you can submit your community of interest maps, you can submit your district maps and public testimony, and we will be taking all of that information into account. As Chairwoman Clyde mentioned, that we'll be preparing a report, and we value your input and would love for you to make sure that you have a chance to input there. To ground us a little bit about redistricting, I want to give an overview of redistricting. So the redistricting process is divided sorry, let me stop for a second. The redistricting process is dividing up like a jurisdiction, such as a state, a county, or a city into districts for the purpose of electing representatives. So where and how the lines are drawn usually influences everything from who is likely to be elected to how resources get allocated. The official line drawing process here in Ohio is controlled by the legislators themselves with a commission of political appointees. As you hear, the Ohio Redistricting Commission, that would be that special commission there. So besides the federal requirements of the population balance and the Voting Rights Act, the Ohio law specifies that districts must be continuous, compact, and not be drawn primarily to favor or disfavor a political party. It requires the legislature and its commission to hold public hearings before final plans are published. The Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission, this commission that we're in right now, was created to model community-centered and citizen-driven redistricting process for the General Assembly, for the official commission, to make sure that they understand that we value community input and that the citizens are the ones who are going to drive this process. Thank you so much for everything that you've all done, and we hope that you stay engaged, continue to check back with us to make sure you stay up to date with things that are going on with the commission. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chairwoman Clyde.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Brock. We appreciate that update. A lot going on now on the redistricting front officially. Let's turn it over to Commissioner Sam Gresham to give the official commission welcome from Central Ohio. Take it away, Sam. First, you got to unmute though.
Technologically challenged again. I'll admit my age and my lack of knowledge. Thank you, Madam Chair. It is indeed my honor to represent Central Ohio today and a large part of the area we're covering. My name is Samuel Gresham Jr., and I live on the far east side on the McNaughton Road component of Columbus. I've served in several positions for the city government over my 40-year history. Supervisor, Department of Development, Chief of Single Family Development, Department of HUD, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Columbus Urban League for 20 years. A leader of Common Cause, Chairman of the Board of Common Cause, Executive Director of the African American Male Commission, and Chief of Staff for the Treasurer of the Franklin County. In 2015 and 18, Ohio voters approved constitutional amendments to change the way General Assembly and congressional districts are drawn. Both of these initiatives were overwhelmingly supported by the public. In 2015, a majority was 71.4%, and in 2018, 74.1%. These results clearly indicate that voters support the idea of having a process to draw lines correctly and fairly. When our other people believe that the success, that we were not going to be successful, we refused to accept that. We plowed away, and today we have a process in place that I believe will carry us to the next century. For those of you who've been in this process, and you know who you are, with me for more than 20 years, I applaud you because I identify you as the best of America, doing their best for America. And young people, the lesson I want you to learn is it takes time. It is not like computers. It took us 16 years to get one portion done, and for some of the others, it took 20-some years. I will leave that as my opening, and I look forward to a robust discussion. Now, Madam Chair, I have some testimony about Central Ohio I'd like to put on the table. Should I just wait and not do that now?
Sam, thank you for that welcome. Let's pause on that and have you give that during the witness testimony, if that's okay with you.
Fine, no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. And we will get into the speaker and witness portion of this public hearing. We have some special guests with us this evening. We're excited to hear from them, and I am going to start with not Kathleen Clyde as it may appear on the Zoom, but with Franklin County Commissioner, former state representative, former state treasurer, certainly an expert on all things having to do with how these districts get drawn and political processes. We're very glad to have you with us here tonight, Commissioner Kevin Boyce. The floor is yours. After you unmute.
Can you? Okay.
Perfect,
Can you? This is it better? Okay.
Yep,
You know,
perfect.
you would think, given the pandemic that we've been in over the last 2 years, we have all this mute and unmute stuff down packed, but not quite is the case with me. And pardon me for calling from my car. I'm rushing around 19 meetings, and so I apologize. But I do want to thank you, Commissioner and former State Representative Kathleen Clyde, for your leadership in convening this conversation. Honestly, as I think about my role as president of the Franklin County Board of, while we have a lot of things happening, pandemic, we have a growing vast community, crime is up, opiate overdoses are up. As I think about the actions and the steps that we're taking, there's nothing that I can think of that has a bigger implication in our actions than this redistricting process. And for those who don't think that they have a role or influence in the redistricting conversation, let me share with you a little bit of history about Franklin County. And I know that Sam, who's a far better aficionado of this conversation than I, let him talk about it. But just 10 years ago, Central Ohio had the struggle. We've always been one of the fastest growing regions in the state. And for those of you who may not know, Franklin County is just a little over 1.3 million residents. And currently Columbus is a little over 900,000 citizens in the city of Columbus. And 10 years ago, that was about 750,000 or so. And so we're growing at a very fast rate. But going back 10 years ago, Central Ohio was split in a diagonal way where the district, the two, really three, but mainly two districts that represented Central Ohio in Congress were I would describe as Northwestern and Southeastern districts, which meant that the Central Ohio voice was sort of drowned out by the sort of regional inclusion of folks outside of Franklin County because it didn't make up the majority of the voting population. And so we never were represented in Congress the way that we are today. 10 years ago, the 3rd Congressional District was created, and for the very first time, Columbus, Central Ohio had a congressperson that represented the majority of residents that live in Central Ohio in Franklin County. And so, and what that's meant for us on a number of levels is substantial in funds. But let me give you one really important example during the pandemic, and then I'll stop talking. And that is when Congress first started with the relief packages around COVID-19 and the funds that they were with CARES Act that they were expending. The original formula, the way it was created, would have excluded. Sorry, my battery went down. Can you still hear me? Okay, I should plug up because it's saying that my phone is. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Central Ohio was excluded. It would have been excluded from the original formula, and the reason why was because the way it was set up was that they were going to say that a city like Columbus would have to be subtracted from the county's numbers, and that would make the county fall below the 500,000 resident threshold that where you could get your direct subsidy to address the pandemic. Well, Commissioner Clyde, Representative Clyde, you know that counties serve a very unique and certain purpose, very different than the city of Columbus. So taking them out, excluding them as a number would have significant implications. But we were able to work directly with our congressperson that represent our interests because of the district that was drawn 10 years ago. And as a result, we're very influential in changing the formula so that Franklin County would not have Columbus's number excluded from us, thus disqualifying us for a direct subsidy. And so I use that example because there are examples every day like that, that have real implications for the residents of Franklin County, have very serious consequences if we're not able to engage with that resource that allows us to address the problem, whatever it is that we're talking about. And so, and here's the bottom line. You get one chance to do it every 10 years. And so whatever we do right now will have implications that will last a decade. And I think about 10 years ago, I don't know about you, Rep. Clyde, but 10 years ago, I was definitely a lot thinner. I was, my hair, I didn't have as much gray. I was so much more young and vibrant then. So a lot can happen in 10 years. So imagine if what you do just holds for 10 years. And so it's so important. And I see Rep. Leland, good to see him. I know he'll have some things to say, my good friend. But the point is that you get one shot every 10 years. And so we now have an opportunity, and I know the rules have changed. And I'm one of those people who believe that, they tweak the rules every so often, every 10 years. But more importantly, the most important part of the process is that everyday people chime in, that everyday communities speak up and voice their concerns, their challenges, their hopes. And together we come up with something that is fair and equitable and reasonable for everybody. That probably doesn't exist, but we have to work to get close to it best we can. And that's really what we're talking about, is engaging everyday people, engaging our leaders, and really in trying to create a process that allows us to maximize our position so that when the lines are drawn, we are in position to have the best state that we can possibly have to live, work, and raise your family. And so as a commissioner, that's what we'll be promoting and pushing for. And we'll have a lot to say about the implications for Franklin County, but more importantly, the implications if folks here in Central Ohio don't speak up and are not a part of the process.
Commissioner, thank you so much. That is very helpful perspective for all of us. We really appreciate your advocacy and you're taking the time to join us this evening. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely.
We have a slew of very special guests this evening, and like Commissioner Boyce and the other guests we have, we're going to move on to Councilwoman Elizabeth Brown. Many of you may not know this, but Elizabeth Brown got her start in Ohio politics officially working in the State House, and has that experience, has been a leader on the caucus political effort. So knows a lot about districts across Ohio and the impacts of gerrymandering. And then of course, now as a city leader, has some good perspective to share with us about how gerrymandering impacts the residents of the city of Columbus that she represents. So we're so glad to have you, Councilwoman Elizabeth Brown.
Thank you so much. Kathleen, thank you for all of your efforts for fair districts and fair elections over your really career, even before elected office. And thank you to all the residents who are participating tonight, who are using their voices to argue for and push for fair districts. As Representative Clyde mentioned, I did used to work in the State House, and in my time in the State House, I was partially responsible for recruiting candidates district by district in the 99 districts in the House. And so I saw the ways, this was in 2009 that I was doing recruitment, the ways that the districts kind of made no sense then. And it's really only gotten worse during that time. Right? And we call that gerrymandering. If you're on this call, you know what gerrymandering is. Carolyn. If you're on this call, you know what gerrymandering is, because it's probably part of why you're passionate about being here. And what I want to emphasize is not only as a city leader now, I think as a caucus official at the time, I really understood the implications for partisan politics that that the gerrymandered lines have. But as a city official, I also understand the implications in terms of geography and the overrepresentation of certain kind of jurisdictional or geographic interests, where people, like myself, like Commissioner Boyce, who represent a significant number of sort of urban or dense suburban areas, mid-sized towns rather than townships, don't have as much of a voice in the legislature. And the way I know that is true is by taking a look at the roster of the legislature, but also by the way I know that is true is by following the laws they have passed with this very weighted legislature in the last several decades. It hurts my constituents when the legislature expressly over and over takes away our ability on home rule, whether that's our ability to pass our own minimum wage laws or paid family leave laws, whether that's our ability to pass laws around guns, which, as Commissioner Boyce mentioned, are a plague and a problem for our city. So when I look at the implications of gerrymandering, and I think about sort of this moment in time we all have to use our voices, I think it's impossible to overstate how important the work you're doing here and the commissioners, the work you're doing across the state. It's impossible to overstate how important that is, because we are really thwarting the representation that every individual person in Central Ohio has when their representation is skewed in the legislature and skewed in the Congress. That's at the heart of gerrymandering, people not getting their full whole person representation. So thank you for using their voices. I talk to residents all the time who are frustrated that they feel their votes don't really matter in legislative races or congressional races when gerrymandering persists. So thank you. This is generational work. We are working on lines for the next 10 years, which then are the kind of playing field for the 10 years after that. So it's so important. Thank you, Janice Brock, for your leadership. Thank you, Kathleen Clyde, for all that you do, and to all the commissioners and all the residents. Really proud to be in your association tonight.
Thank you so much, Columbus City Councilwoman Elizabeth Brown, for your insights tonight. We're so glad that we could have you join us. Thank you. Next up, we have a legislator with us, but as many of you know, David Leland is not just a legislator. He has been a leader in Central Ohio for many years and a former state party chair for the Democratic Party in Ohio. His insights are very valuable. I know as a former colleague of his how much he cares about ensuring that we have better districts, a better process and fairness. State Representative David Leland, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, everybody, for all the hard work and dedication that you put into this process. I want to make a special shout out to my buddy Greg Moore, who I've known for 25 years in various capacities in trying to get things done for the people of this state and this country. So, and I also want to say hello to my good friend Barbara Sykes, who I see on this show tonight, or whatever we call this, the Zoom show tonight. So I want to say a special shout out to her also. And I wouldn't be a good politician if I didn't identify the two hardest working people in my House district, Katie Shanahan and Mia Lewis, who are also integral parts of this process. So thank you for all of that. You know, I want to reiterate a lot of what Kevin and Liz said, but I think it's more than just the fact that we elect people, that the number of people we elect doesn't represent the political reality of the state of Ohio. It's really the kind of people that we represent and what happens. So what happens is when you have a gerrymandered system, then really the primary becomes the most important election in anybody's election, because we all know who's going to win the general. These districts are gerrymandered to the extent that everybody, a Democrat or Republican, is probably going to win the general election because of the way the districts are drawn. So what becomes the most important election? It's the primary election. The primary election that's going to decide who that particular nominee is. And so in primary elections, you know, I have 135,000 people in my district, but I have probably 8,000 to 10,000 people that will vote in a primary. So somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 people are all I really need to convince or to get to my side or have to vote for me or in any particular election in order to make sure that I'm the Democratic nominee and that therefore I become the person that wins the general election. And in the Republican Party, what that produces is a very, very radical group of individuals who represent the Republican Party, because the people that, you know, the 3,000 or 4,000, the 5,000 people that control the primary in the Republican Party in some of these districts are generally your most radicalized members of society, the people that, you know, probably they didn't participate in the January 6th insurgency, they certainly supported it. And it's those kind of people who are pushing the kind of representatives that we see in the General Assembly. So what does that mean? Well, that means the people, you don't see a George Voinovich or a Bob Taft or people like that for those of us who are a little bit older, remember that used to be part of the Republican Party, and that while we disagreed with them on many issues, they were nonetheless very thoughtful and respectful representatives of their district and very, very important people in the future of the state of Ohio. No, we get the Nino Vitalis and other people that now represent the Republican Party in the legislature, and those people are representing a very, very narrow view, views that doesn't include any kind of cooperation with people from the other side, because if they did that, they would look weak to the 3,000 or 4,000 people in their district that are controlling the primary, and so they're not going to do that. And so the people that want to take a more bipartisan or a more thoughtful approach to legislative work are not going to be selected by those people. And so you can just see how it not only creates a skewed up political system as far as the numbers are concerned, but it also creates a very, very destructive system as far as people being able to work together and work together on issues that generally people are in favor of. And so that's why when 3 or 4% or 5% of a particular district controls an election and therefore controls the general election, now you know why something like background checks for gun sales, which has 81% approval in this country, can't get passed. Why a red flag law that has 72% approval in this country can't get passed. Why paid maternity leave, which has 84% approval in this country, can't get passed. It doesn't matter about the 84% or the 72% or the 81% or the 73% who support a wealth tax. It doesn't matter about that. What matters in a gerrymandered system is that do you win the support of the 4 or 5% of the people who are radicalized, who are controlling the Republican Party in the primary. And so that's where the real problem comes in when you deal with the gerrymandered system. And that's how I see, that's why I see it's very, very, very important for us to do whatever we can do to make sure the districts are as good as they possibly can be. Now that's from the state's perspective. From the federal perspective, you know, look, I just look at January 6th. We need as many Democrats as we can get. It's not a question of Democrats and Republicans. It's a question of saving our democracy. So what we need to do between now and when we finish this process is add as many Democrats to the Pelosi column as we possibly can. And I know that's a partisan approach, and I know we're supposed to be talking about this on a nonpartisan basis, but this is a question between whether we have a democracy or whether we don't. And I don't view that as a partisan approach. I view that as a patriotic approach. And we see what the response is by Kevin McCarthy and the minority party as to what happened on January 6th. We know what they want to do if they take control. This is all about our patriotic duty to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's why we have to have the largest contingency of Democrats coming from Ohio at the end of this process. So that's all I have to say. Nothing, no big deal. You know, that's all we have to do. But again, thank you. Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for always putting in the time and the effort and the emotion to get things done. And I know that if we work together and make it happen, we will make it happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Leland. We really appreciate that. And that's a very helpful kind of different perspective for us to keep in mind. We appreciate you very much. I am going to move on now to our witness list. And first up, we have already heard a shout out for her tonight, and I will add on a huge advocate for redistricting and redistricting reform and fair districts. Nobody in some ways has been a more involved citizen advocate. She is here tonight representing Common Cause Ohio. Mia Lewis is first up, and I just want to do a quick on deck. After Mia, we will call on Camille Wimbush. So Mia, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and much appreciation to everyone who has spoken before with so much knowledge and passion on this incredibly important issue. I have some remarks that I wrote out, so I'm going to read them. I hope that's okay. I am testifying to the commission, and here is my testimony. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to present my testimony today. My name is Mia Lewis, and I join you as a representative of Common Cause Ohio and Fair Districts, key organizations that were a critical part of the successful redistricting reform efforts in 2015 and 2018. Today was a very exciting day with the release of the census data. We are one step closer to the creation of new, fairer political maps for Ohio. And I know many people here today were involved in the reform efforts, and you know the massive amount of people power that it took to get these new redistricting rules. In 2017 and 2018, for example, over 1,000 volunteers myself included, and many of you as well, spread out all across Ohio to collect signatures to end gerrymandering. And over 100 volunteers validated over 200,000 signatures that were collected by those volunteers. And then an army of grassroots volunteers worked to urge a yes vote on issue 1 of May 2018. And we all celebrated together when the measure passed by over 70% and passed in all 88 counties. People all across Ohio came together to change the rules to improve the quality of our elections and our democracy. This was a rare, genuinely grassroots effort, fueled not by vast infusions of money, but by people's passion to improve democracy and put an end to a corrupt and corrupting system. We celebrated the landslide victories in 2015 and 2018, but we also know that the work is not done. This is the hard part right now. Even though Ohio has better redistricting rules than many states, and even though we have in the Ohio Constitution expectations about transparency and public hearings, and even though we have good open meetings rules in Ohio, we know the period we're entering right now will not be easy. If history is a guide, those who are in control of the redistricting process will be willing to play all sorts of games. Even with new rules, the desire of incumbents and those in power to use redistricting to lock in their political advantage has not changed. It was never going to be easy to take power away from elected officials and from the party in control. That's why public participation and engagement in the process is so vitally important. That's why this meeting today and others like it can make a difference. So here's what we're looking forward to seeing in new political maps in Ohio. Maps that keep political subdivisions whole as a proxy for keeping communities of interest together. Increased competitiveness so that the winner in the general election is no longer a foregone conclusion. Representational fairness, that means that the partisan balance of our legislative and congressional districts roughly mirrors how Ohioans have voted over the past 10 years in statewide and national elections. That's about 46% Democratic, 54% Republican. And of course, we're looking to see a transparent process where the public have a genuine opportunity to weigh in and have their voices heard. Now, a word about our tight timeline for making maps. More than 1,000 people gathered signatures, hundreds of thousands signed, and millions voted for reforms, not because they wanted maps drawn by September 1st or September 15th or September 30th. They voted and they got signatures and all those things because they wanted fair maps created in a transparent process with public participation. They wanted their communities kept together. They wanted the number of lawmakers elected from either party to represent the number of voters who support them. They want responsive government, competitive general elections, not just primaries, and politicians who will represent everyone in their districts. They want to choose their representatives rather than being cracked, packed, and otherwise manipulated into districts that mean guaranteed wins for one party or another. They're no longer willing to be used as pawns in a political partisan battle that simply leads to dysfunctional government. The time for fair maps is now. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mia, for that testimony. Commissioners, we have time for 1 or 2 questions for our witnesses this evening. Mia, I assume you'd be willing to take a question or 2?
Sure.
Okay, if you could use the raise hand function, commissioners, if we have any questions, please raise your hand. Commissioner Katie Shanahan.
Hello, hi Mia, good to see you virtually. We live in the same House district, in the same congressional district, and I'd be shocked if we also don't live in the same state Senate district. And I know that our neighborhood is successfully cracked apart from the rest of Columbus and drowned out into rural conservative districts that bring together parts of the state that we don't have a lot in common with. And so I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about what it would mean for either our neighborhood or Columbus writ large to have better districts that are actually representative of our communities, and what you think that actually looks like.
That's a great question. I do have to admit that I've become very attached to 12 as it is now, and my fellow 12 people in Zanesville and in Mansfield. And they will, even if we no longer are in the same congressional district, we will always be together in some ways. But you know, it's really a travesty when you look around, you know, our neighborhood and you see, you know, how people vote and you see the kinds of things that they care about, and then you see who our representatives are. We are not, with the exception of our wonderful Representative Leland, who is here, who is our Ohio representative, you know, being a part of a larger Columbus, you know, actually being part of a Columbus district in a way that we aren't now would really be meaningful, and we'd be fighting, you know, for things together across neighborhoods in a way that we aren't now. And I think it would bring us together and help us to have more at stake for improving things in, let's say, Columbus City Schools, or, you know, it would tie us to the community in a way in which we aren't really now, because we're kind of separated out. And I just think, you know, the fact that we've been cracked just takes away our representation. It means we can't fight for the kinds of things, we can't weigh in on the kinds of things that we really care about, and even and push for things that we care about. I did actually have the experience of sitting with my congressional representative and have him tell me that it really didn't matter what I thought, because he was going to get reelected anyway. And I would much prefer to have a representative who felt that he had to fight for my vote. You know, specifically how being a part of, I just think it will be a whole different attitude if we're in a congressional district, in a Senate district, where we have more in common with the other people, more at stake together for our community. That will be a very different feeling.
Thanks, Mia and Katie. Over to Commissioner Sam Gresham. Sam, you're muted. Still muted.
There we go.
All right.
Maya, thank you for your excellent presentation. Focus of my question is on the 3rd Congressional District and a little history. The 3rd Congressional District used to be the 14th and the 15th Congressional District. And that consisted of, at the time, Kasich and T-Berry, who were the 2 representatives. But the significance of the 14th and the 15th was that it split the city of Columbus between the 2 districts, and more specifically, the African-American community. So the African-American community was neutered for all intents and purposes. Given that we have some instructions that require us to split Franklin County, what would be your recommendations to us with regarding that splitting?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think that's one reason why a lot of us have been busy making community maps, so that people in the communities themselves can talk about why it's important to keep their community together. Yeah, a line is going to have to be drawn somewhere in Franklin County. We are too big to be just one congressional district. Honestly, I think that it's important to have people say, talk about their communities and give their opinions, and then put that together and, do the best to draw a line in a place that makes the best sense. But I personally am not going to speculate right now about exactly where and how to draw that line. But it's a very important historical point that you make, and definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mia, for your testimony tonight. We're going to move on to our next witness, but thank you so much again. Do want to put a plug in too. I know that Vice Chair Brock mentioned this, but we are still encouraging community members to submit their community of interest citizens generated maps, which you can do on the website for the commission. So a good way to provide input to commission members who will be providing input to the official process about this data that we are collecting. Next up, we have Camille Wimbish, who I'm excited to be reconnected with. She has been a great advocate for fair districts and currently serves as the Election Administration Director at Ohio Voice. Just a on deck heads up, Robert Shelley, you will be up next. With that, Camille, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Well, hello, everyone. It's so good to be among so many friends again. My name is Camille Wimbish, and I am here to provide a statement in support of a fair redistricting process on behalf of the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, or OVRC as we're also known. We're basically a nonpartisan network of local, state, and national voter advocates committed to modernizing our elections and ensuring that we have secure and improved voter access for all Ohioans. Our work is motivated by the firm belief that democracy is strongest when it includes us all. We strongly believe that when we all have access to the ballot and make our voices heard, we create a democracy that's more just, equitable, and inclusive, and reflective of the values we want to see in the world. The OVRC also advocates for increased fairness and transparency throughout government to ensure that when we do vote, our elections are meaningful. We conduct nonpartisan outreach to Ohioans who are often overlooked by the political parties because, quite simply, they don't vote frequently enough. And so one of the common reasons that we hear from voters who aren't registered to vote, or perhaps they don't often participate on all of the elections, is that they say that they don't think that their vote matters, that it makes a difference. And it's actually hard to argue with them given the realities of gerrymandering. Because we have district maps that have been manipulated so badly that the outcomes of many of our state and congressional elections are determined before the votes are ever counted. These safe seats create unaccountable politicians who position themselves to the extremes of their party. As a result, underrepresented communities grow further disillusioned and disengaged by the political process because they don't see themselves or their values reflected by their so-called representatives. This is a broken cycle, but redistricting reform offers us a way out. Fortunately, the voters of Ohio overwhelmingly passed redistricting reform in 2015 and 2018, and now these voter-approved plans are centering principles of fairness, bipartisanship, transparency, keeping communities together. We've got the census complete now, and the time has finally come to see those plans come to fruition. We will all be watching to ensure that the Ohio Redistricting Commission and the Ohio Legislature engage in a transparent map-making process, that they listen to the input from the public, from all of us here today about proposed maps, and that they follow the voter-approved rules set forth in our state constitution, because Ohioans deserve fair districts and meaningful elections. Thank you. That kind of concludes my remarks tonight.
Thank you so much, Camille. Do you have time for a couple questions?
Sure.
If we have them? Great. I'm going to go over to co-chair Greg Moore.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you again, Camille, for joining us tonight, and for taking the time. And your leadership in this state around voting rights is important. One of the reasons I wanted to ask you a question was because, and I've been around, and Kathleen's been around, and Sam and others, Mia, we fight these voting rights battle all the time, going back years and years. And can you say anything about how you think the redistricting process impacts our state in having to fight and relitigate all of these battles over and over again? Can you say something that would help us sort of see the voting rights community as a community of interest who care about these issues and would like to see fair maps in that context?
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have been, fighting these fights, as Greg mentioned, for almost for a decade now. seeing all of the attempts to roll back voting rights, taking away access. They've tried to do it at one fell swoop in one big package. Greg, I first really met Greg when he was active on the 194 battle back in 2011. They've also taken attempts to sort of take away bit by bit. And here we are as a voting rights community and as a larger democracy movement, trying to stand firm and hold on to the principles that we know are right. And I clearly, the folks at the State House aren't really listening to us. They don't really have our interests at heart. They are looking for ways to silence Black and brown voters. They're looking for ways to make sure that our voices are not heard at the ballot box. And it's because of the things we've talked about tonight that they are sort of governing from the extreme of their wings of their party. They know that unfortunately, if the more people who vote and turn out, tends to mean that their ideas sort of are not as popular and get outweighed. But because they hold these gerrymandered seats, they're able to take these positions and feel like they are completely unaccountable, that doesn't matter how many phone calls or emails they get, that their positions aren't safe. And so that's something that we absolutely have to change if we're going to make a stand and hold true to our rights.
Great. Thank you, Co-Chair Moore, and thank you, Camille. We really appreciate your testimony this evening. Thank you. Next up on our hearing list is Robert Shelley, and just a on deck call to Basma Garada from CARE Ohio on deck. And right now we will give the floor over to you, Bob Shelley. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Bob Shelley, as Kathleen was nice enough to introduce me. I'm an emeritus professor of sociology from Ohio University. I came to Ohio 50 years ago to take the position and spent 40 years on the faculty at OU. And I wish to speak in favor of fair district maps for both the Ohio legislature and the representation in the United States Congress. Those fair maps will reflect the political interests of all Ohioans. The current map is very highly gerrymandered and effectively disenfranchises large numbers of Ohio citizens. It's true for constituents of both parties. A Republican doesn't have a voice in the district that is represented by David Leland, unfortunately. In the most recent elections, Democrats have garnered over 45% of the vote, but hold only 25% of the seats in the United States Congress. As well, Republicans hold a supermajority in both houses of the Ohio legislature. They don't have to consider the views of large numbers of people in their districts and around the state. The heavily skewed map consigns significant portions of the electorate to permanent minority status in terms of electing individuals who reflect their views. Changes that were specified in the Ohio Constitution as a result of the referendums in 2015 and 2018 will make possible districts that reflect the political will of all of the voters of Ohio. The ability to pack voters into districts will be limited by the requirements that political boundaries must be observed when drawing districts. In addition, the requirement that county, city, and township boundaries must be represented in drawing districts means that political subdivisions are kept compact in new districts. Many of my neighbors have submitted practice maps for your consideration. I am aware that some of these maps favor Democratic Party electorates. Others are neutral in the sense that they have been developed to reflect the proportion of party representation for each electorate. Still others heavily favor Republican electorates. I've chosen not to prepare a map. I feel that the principles outlined by the constitutional changes should be adhered to in drawing the maps. I do wish to speak to one idea that has been advanced by groups of advocates for a significant approach to the drawing of districts. Specifically, the principle that communities of interest should be maintained as a potential means for creating gerrymandered districts. I use my own area as an example to illustrate this. I live close to a geographic border between two very different parts of the city of Columbus. If you draw a map extending the boundaries to the east, the district includes a large number of moderate income households. If you draw the map extending it to the west, the income profile for the population would be very affluent. Difference in these two ways of drawing a boundary do not meet the compactness requirements for legislative or congressional districts. The income differences might not reflect political differences, but they clearly reflect socioeconomic differences in the population of the two areas and the potential interest and need for social services. To summarize, I wish to advocate for legislative and congressional districts that reflect the voting interests of the entire state of Ohio and do not assign members of one political party to permanent minority status. Thank you for listening to my testimony this evening.
Thank you, Bob. We really appreciate you being here. Let me ask the commissioners, do we have any questions for Bob Shelley? Okay. Thank you so much, Bob, for being with us this evening. We really appreciate your perspective and your taking the time to share that helpful testimony with us. Take care.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Basma Garada, who is a representative with CARE Ohio. And then on deck, I just want to give you a heads up. We have Hadia Akhtar, who is a Central Ohio community member. So Hadia on deck, and Basma, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Basma Jarad. I would like to thank all of you, first of all, for organizing this. This is the first meeting that I've been able to be a part of, but it's very easy to see why going to these meetings is extremely important, especially during this process. I'm an operations coordinator at CARE, and I'm going to be reading our testimony on behalf of CARE. So, good evening. My name is Basma Jarada, and I am speaking on behalf of the Ohio chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, known as CARE Ohio. As a civil rights and advocacy organization for Ohio Muslims, we understand what fair maps mean to our community. Muslims are often the subject of political discourse, yet rarely receive adequate political representation. The way our districts are drawn not only takes away our voting power, but also impacts how policy is made and how we are treated as constituents. We are working to ensure that citizens in underrepresented communities like ours are involved in redistricting. We refuse to let Muslims be left out, split up, or ignored in this critical process. Gerrymandering is a calculated and dangerous practice undertaken by both political parties to diminish political power among geographic communities, and it disproportionately impacts minority groups who have less political influence as it is. Too many of us have had little to say in who represents us and watched helplessly as laws are passed that hurt our families and ignore our needs. One example of many is the neighborhood surrounding the Newark Islamic Cultural Center, one of the largest Muslim communities in Central Ohio. It is currently split into 2 congressional districts and 2 state house districts, thus diluting the voting power of Muslims and immigrants in the community. Because of the way the districts are drawn, our elected officials have no incentive to be receptive, accessible, or responsive to us and our concerns. Fair and equal districts will return power to the people. This year is our chance to have an open, transparent, and truly fair redistricting process. Ohioans know their communities best, and therefore it is imperative that the official redistricting commission allows ample time and opportunity for the public to provide input. A select number of politicians could not possibly understand the full picture of diversity within our Ohio communities. Fair maps can only be accomplished through input from our diverse community members. This is the only way to ensure minorities do not continue to be politically disenfranchised. Thank you.
Thank you, Basma. We really appreciate your testimony tonight and your being here with us. Do you have a moment if we have any questions for you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
Awesome.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? If you do, please use the raise your hand function. Okay. Oh, over to co-chair Greg Moore with a question.
Thank you, co-chair. I did have a quick question for you or for anyone from CARE who wants to answer. Do we have an idea of how the distribution of your community is across the state? You mentioned Central Ohio, but just curious about Northeast Ohio and maybe Southwest Ohio. Can you say more about the distribution? And I know there's been some submissions over the last several weeks. Be good for people to know a little bit more.
I think if Amina is on this, maybe she can help me out in answering this question, because do you mean like in terms of how those communities up there are split, or?
Not so much how they're split, just that there's geographic representation. I think you had a line, political discourse without political representation. That's a very key line. And I think if we would lift that up, not just in Central Ohio, but Northeast Ohio, that'd be great for us to know that there's a, there's a community of representation across the state and not just Central Ohio. That's the point I was trying to make.
Right. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So we have, in terms of CARE, we are CARE Ohio. We represent Columbus, like the Columbus area, and then Cincinnati. And then we have a CARE Cleveland that represents more of like northern Ohio, if that's correct. Amina, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Besma, for being here. I wanted to spare, I'm in the middle of travel, so I wanted to spare you the bumpy ride. But to answer your question, Chair Moore, I think that that's a complex answer, but I'll attempt to take a stab at it. Muslims are the most diverse ethnic group of all faith traditions, generally speaking, half of which are either immigrants or children of immigrants. And so there's a predominantly immigrant story. So in general, what we see is that Muslims are mostly populated around metropolitan areas. However, there is no overarching study that really is able to exemplify that because of the diversity of what it means to be Muslim as a faith group. Having said that, I think that that is part of the challenge. But what we do know is that Muslims data tells us that Muslims are the least likely to partake in voting, the least likely civically engaged. And so what we attempt to do at CARE Ohio is, based on the studies that we know, that those that attend mosques are the most civically engaged. That is one of our facets to be able to engage individuals within the Muslim community. So having said that, particularly when it comes to splitting communities that are part of mosques, it is exceptionally troubling because it is imperative that those communities that are the most civically engaged and passionate around issues remain together. And so Newark, and I know in the docket there will be a community member that will speak to this from her own experience as a community member within Newark Islamic Cultural Center. However, there are other communities that are similar across Ohio. Unfortunately, this is such a thick participatory process that part of our CARE has been that there's such an educational component in the lead up to redistricting that creates an exceptional challenge for us to make sure that we are engaging individuals within this process. So I hope that answers your question. And if it's not that's something that we grapple with within the organization.
No, it absolutely does. And it's a great education for many of us. So thank you for sharing that and for your whole organizational work around redistricting. Thank you.
All right, looking around, I think that wraps up our questions. I want to say thank you, Basma, for being here to testify. Amina, thank you for chiming in there. And we will move on through our list. And on deck witness is Kalia Tellez. But first up, we have Hadia Akhtar, a community member from Central Ohio. Hadia, the floor is yours. Are you here? Yes. Okay, Hadia, over to you. Thank you for being here.
Good evening. My name is Hadia, and I'm testifying on behalf of some of the Columbus community, especially surrounding the Newark Cultural Center. I grew up living next to the Newark Islamic Cultural Center, which is surrounded by a large Muslim community. The community around the mosque has always been very passionate about politics. Like Sister Amina said, you know, most of our civic engagement is involved through the mosque. And it's always been a struggle advancing issues that affect our community because of the way our neighborhood is segmented through gerrymandering. The Muslim community living around the mosque is split into 2 congressional districts and 2 state house districts. As a minority group, it is already difficult enough to make our voices heard, and gerrymandering exacerbates that issue. It's very disheartening to be living among such enthusiastic community members, and that they unfortunately get silenced by greedy political practices a lot of the time.
All right. Does that conclude your testimony, Hadia?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you have a moment for a question if a commission member has one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Commissioners, raise your hand if you have a question. Katie Shanahan.
Thank you, Hadia. I'm curious, both you and Basma articulated that particularly the Newark Islamic Cultural Center here on the west side of town is split between 2 different districts. I'm curious if you can just give us insight about how better it would make sense to draw those districts in a way that actually included the entire surrounding community of interest together in a district. So are there parts around the cultural center that it would make sense for us to really keep in mind? And I know, and I have to give us a huge shout out to all the folks at CARE Ohio who have been working diligently and hosting map drawing meetings with folks across the state who are getting those maps into us. But it would be really great just to hear directly from you about how better it would make sense to draw those districts to make sure we're not unnecessarily splitting apart that community.
So I'm not sure exactly where the lines are, but I'm sure that by creating the lines so that more of the community that surrounds the mosque, if they were in one congressional district, the population that lives here would be better, better represented. Because since it's 2 districts, our voices are always separated in the 2 districts. So I think Sister Amina probably knows more about this, but by making the lines so that most of the community that lives in this like Hilliard, Columbus, Dublin area into 1 district, it would make the voices better represented.
Great. Thank you so much. Amina, question?
Yeah, I wanted to shout out to Hadia. Thank you so much for coming forward, even as, you know, someone who's a young graduate into college and being involved at this level. So I want to thank you for taking the time. I did also want to clarify the lines. At the present moment, that particular area where Newark Islamic Cultural Center, there's a coalescing of city lines, school district lines, as well as state district lines and congressional district lines. So it's split into, I mean, there's so many levels of splitting and cracking the community open. And I think gerrymandering is amongst, you know, the one way that it's really important to be able to address it. So I don't have a map in front of me, but south, and I would say this is the first block south of the mosque begins a new congressional district and a new, a completely different state representative district. And so that is very troubling. Although it's a community center, which a lot of commuters from across Central Ohio come to, at the very least, I think surrounding at least a half-mile radius should not be split. And that is not the case at the present moment. We're talking, a block south. So there are individual in cleared city lines that travel very frequently to the mosque, almost a few times a day, for both prayer activities and engagement. And so that becomes extremely problematic. And so this is, I would suppose, exhibit A in terms of how a community is split. And so it's really important that it be recognized and take, an account be taken in terms of how it is split so drastically. I hope that answers your question, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you, Amina. And again, Hadia, we really, really appreciate you being here with us this evening. Next up, very patiently waiting here this evening, we have Kalia Tellez, who is a environmental policy fellow with the Ohio Environmental Council. Kalia, before I call on you, I just want to give an on deck shout out to Nagha Bellefontaine, who will be speaking to us next on deck. So thank you so much, Kalia, for joining us, and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyde. And thank you all for this opportunity to provide testimony linking environmental justice here in Central Ohio with the importance of fair and representative maps. So my name is Kalia Tellez, and I'm speaking tonight both as a concerned citizen and on behalf of the Ohio Environmental Council as the Environmental Policy Fellow. The mission of the OEC is to secure healthy air, land, and water for all who call Ohio home. But a healthy environment is not possible without a functioning and fair democracy. Without this, Ohio will continue to perpetuate environmental injustice, allowing environmental protection to become a politically polarizing issue. The creation of fair maps must center BIPOC voices who experience more environmental injustices. Low-income communities of color facing financial and health barriers from systemic racism are disproportionately likely to face severe air and water pollution. Now, under our current maps, Ohio has many districts that crack apart communities and connect disparate communities with wildly different environmental experiences and access to resources. This deliberate cracking of communities dilutes the power Ohioans have to advocate for issues that must take priority in being addressed by their legislature. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I want to walk through some examples. Can I just get confirmation that you can all see this map here on the left? Perfect, thanks. So this is EJ Screen, an environmental justice mapping and screening tool that provides the EPA with a data set and approach for combining environmental and demographic indicators. So the EJ index score, depicted by this range of colors, it's higher in block groups with larger numbers of low income and minority residents with a higher environmental risk. So first, what we're looking at here, this is Superfund proximity overlaid with Ohio House districts. So we're going to be looking here at districts 26 and 20. District 20 right here scoops out Whitehall, an area experiencing the highest EJ index for Superfund proximity. And it sort of circumvents this District 26, which is a lot of hazardous areas. And it groups Whitehall with this community north and south of Reynoldsburg, which is not experiencing these same levels of hazards, diluting the voices of those most affected by Superfund proximity. Now, this is National Air Toxics Assessment cancer risk overlaid with House districts. And this time we're going to be looking at House District 18 here in the center and how it captures the higher income majority white communities of Grandview Heights, Marble Cliff, Jorman Village, and Bexley, which have the lowest percentile cancer risk. But looking along this eastern border of District 18, there are some of the highest EJ index cancer risk scores. So this map has, these districts have virtually sealed off the people with the most political advocacy power. Middle-class white people who can afford to access lawyers can take time off work to advocate into one district that doesn't share the environmental burden of the surrounding communities. So give you all vertigo with shifting through so fast. Finally, we're going to look at the hazardous waste proximity. So I want to draw your attention up here to the left side. This shows the high hazardous waste risk surrounding Ohio State University. But the neighborhoods in close proximity to this hazard are represented by 4 different House districts. So once again, cracking those affected by the same environmental hazards and diluting their power for advocacy. So the point of these demonstrations is that districts must center environmental hazards and environmental justice and understand who is in close proximity and what communities share these hazards. If we don't prioritize these issues that are affecting Ohioans' quality of life, health, rights to clean air and clean water, then what can our leaders say that they are representing? So I urge you to consider this critical perspective when advocating for fair maps and equal districts representing Ohio communities. And thank you so much for your time.
Kalia, thank you so much. I can tell that the mapping and the visual was very impactful to our commission members, myself included. We really appreciate your testimony. Do you have time to take a couple of questions if we have them?
I do, thank you.
Great. Co-chair Greg Moore.
Yes, this is more of a personal comment. I do appreciate this testimony so much, Clea, because I do have 2 sisters who are both cancer. One is who's a cancer survivor, and one who's unfortunately did not survive her cancer, and they both live in that area. And we don't know what or why it happened. They both, in their 30s and 40s, and so I don't know if there's a link, but for a lot of people who have lost people or trying to figure it out, I've lost a lot of friends to cancer in the Columbus area, and I never saw a link to this at all. I also want to just raise this other issue is that I once had a car that was registered in Franklin County and one registered in Cuyahoga County, and I never knew why the admissions tests were not required for Franklin County residents, but they are for other parts of the state. But when you have family members who are victims of cancer, those kind of things kind of grab you. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry for making this personal, but I couldn't resist thanking you for raising this.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore, for sharing that, that personal perspective to this. I really appreciate that.
I'll chime in and agree with that, and that this is so personal in so many ways, how these districts are drawn, and we really appreciate you breaking that down for us, Kalia. Does anyone else have a question for Kalia? Okay, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time to share with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, I'm going to give an on deck shout out to our final witness of the evening, and that is us coming back around to you, Sam, to talk to us about some of the testimony that you wanted to share separate from your welcome. But before we wrap up with Sam, we are going to go to Anaga Velamakuni. My apologies if I mispronounced the name. Please feel free to correct me. We are so glad to have you. Anaga is an OSU student. Student perspective, I think, is very important and often not as available to us as commission members, although Aki does a good job of working with students all around Ohio and sharing their perspective. But we're so glad to have you here with us tonight. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hello and good evening to everyone. My name is Anagha Valamakani, and I'm a rising senior at The Ohio State University. I'm here today to talk to you all about both the national and state redistricting processes, and particularly how they affect Central Ohio and the university's campus. By definition, redistricting is the process where district lines are redrawn every 10 years following the census to account for population changes. In Ohio, the state legislature redraws new maps, and these maps are enacted after passing through each chamber of the legislature. As of right now, Ohio has not approved of a new map yet. However, redistricting by the legislature in this process allows for political manipulation, such as gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is the manipulation of political districts to rig the outcome of elections to favor one political party over another, and both major parties have had a hand in gerrymandering. Redistricting by legislature also gives way to odd redistricting lines. An example of this can be shown by Ohio Congressional District 4, represented by Jim Jordan, where the eastmost border is in Lorain County, in Northeast Ohio. The southmost border covers Union County and Champaign County in Central Ohio, and the westmost border is in Allen County in Northwest Ohio. In particular to state level districts, Ohio State University comprises of 2 different Senate districts, which are separated by the Olentangy River. And it's also comprised of 2 House districts as well. As a member of both the OSU and Columbus community, I believe separating the university and the community between districts actually works against the goal of representing the community in a productive way. Students and people living near campus have similar needs that need to be addressed in the most economic way, and separating this area into different districts does not aid that goal. These odd borders also show the lack of community engagement in the legislature. Community involvement and say should be a big part of the redistricting process so senators and representatives can approach collective demands as adequately as possible. Allowing for the separation of communities that share the same needs and goals as each other will inherently lead to confusion and ineffective representation. If Ohio State University and the surrounding community had a say in the way that their district lines are drawn, it would be easier to allocate funds and resources to it in the most advantageous way possible. In the current procedure, it seems evident that the community orders are not the priority. It leads us to wonder why district lines are drawn the way that they are. Is it for power? Is it for representation? Is it for fiscal gains? Or is it for all of these things combined? It's not a secret that redistricting is a major problem in Ohio, one that needs to be fixed as soon as possible. I've personally seen how proper allocation of funds to the community affects it in a major way, especially at Ohio State. Proper representation will not only lead to more equitable assets and resources, but also more equitable education. Schools will get better funding and education materials, departments will be funded better, and programs for mental health and tutoring will also get a boost. This not only goes for the university, but it also goes for the surrounding K-12 schools. I call for a new and more productive redistricting process, one that allows for community input and puts the needs of the community at the forefront, not a process that redistricts for political gain. Thank you for your time and consideration tonight, and thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much for being here to testify. Do you have a moment to take a couple of questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. Chris, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks for your testimony, Annika. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts to share about like any issues in particular that a lot of students at Ohio State really care about that maybe aren't properly represented because of the way that there's a line through the student populace in the state legislature.
I personally can't think of anything off the top of my head. I would definitely say when it comes to education materials or any like departments being funded, because that's a really big problem at OSU. Certain departments aren't being funded, or when it comes to environmental issues, that's something that a lot of students on campus are very passionate about. And a huge thing also is mental health. And that's why I mentioned those in my testimony, because that's like something that students really care about at OSU, especially with the stresses of college. And I really feel like proper representation would aid in funding those departments and those programs, especially since education is a major problem in the country and in the state. And even at OSU, like it's students, I believe, need more of a say when it comes to representation. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much again for your testimony, especially helpful for us to hear that student perspective tonight. So thank you and take care. We are going to close out our witnesses with our final witness, and I will turn it over to you, Sam Gresham, to give us some additional perspectives here this evening.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I need to reiterate that the redistricting of 2010 was one of the most egregious process that has ever occurred in the state of Ohio. Example by the Snake on the Lake, which extends a district that extends all the way to the city of Cleveland to Toledo. Now, how much sense does that make? And if you look at the 15th congressional district, which extends from Upper Arlington down to Athens, those two districts, by way of example, just obliterate logic if you look at them. The second component I want to talk about from that general perspective is the population shift. There are approximately 11 million people plus in the state of Ohio. African Americans constitute 1.5 million. Those population centers where African Americans are, specifically Cuyahoga County, Montgomery County, Franklin County, Hamilton County, where populations of 300,000 or more exist. Those districts have been drawn in such a way that Cuyahoga County only ends up with one African American or Democratic congressional member, when the population can service more than that. Hamilton County ends up with fewer. Franklin County, by the Hick and Snick, we ended up with a third congressional district, which is probably the most packed and cracked district in the history of mankind. They took everything they didn't want to give to the rest of Franklin County and the surrounding county and stuck it in Franklin County. Now it's a hell of a district for a Democrat to run from, but it doesn't allow those Democrats and African Americans to have effect on the surrounding communities. I mean, it was drawn, and I was down there to complain, cry, whisper, throw rocks, do everything I possibly could. But they basically said they have one thing that we seem to be as progressive afraid of. That's called power. We don't want to talk about power. We want to talk about fairness. They had power, and guess what? They used it. And by definition of power, it's the ability to act. We need to put ourselves as progressive students, women, African Americans, and brown people in a position to have power. And again, that's the ability to act. They've totally neutered us in the state of Ohio on that. Now, be careful in the rhetoric that's going to come from the opposite side. I am not afraid of, nor do I shy away from the word of power, okay? I think if you're going to play the game, you need power. So when we have our discussions and the battles that we're going to pursue shortly against the General Assembly, keep in your mind it's about power. And power is fairness, okay? Now, I want to then focus on Franklin County. Franklin County has a unique set of variables that are going to have to be taken in consideration. The first set of variables is that Franklin County, because of its size, probably will not end up in one congressional district. So therefore, they have to be split. But there are some anomalies in Franklin County and the surrounding counties that have significantly changed from 2006. The first is the African-American population is significant in the cities of Westerville, Reynoldsburg, Gahanna, Pickerington. Those African-American populations have grown to such a size where the Reynoldsburg city council is primarily African Americans. Out of the seven people in Reynoldsburg, 5 are African Americans on the city council. That's also true for the school board. That's also true for Pickerington. So when we draw those districts, the data, and I can't wait to get the data, Commissioner Boyce gave me a shout out because that's one of the things I really like to do. If you talk about a nerd and data, then you're talking about Sam Gresham. I think how we advocate for the development of those districts around Franklin County affords us some opportunity to do some great things that will allow maybe 2 Democratic districts, 2 Black districts. But there are some things we need to be careful for because we have run down the rabbit hole and we've been snooker. So we have to be very careful in what we do and what we agree with for Franklin County. That has also been true for Hamilton County. That has also been true for Stark County. That has also, Stark County and Summit County in combination presents some tremendous opportunities, but the districts haven't been crafted in such a way that it allows us to work. Now, ending my statement, Franklin County is a unique variable, but it is not the most unique. Hamilton County provides some opportunities. And I know in Cuyahoga, people have rested on the laurels of having 1 congressional person. I don't think that needs to be true. I think they can have more than 1 congressional person. Now, the question is, do we want to use the word power, or are we afraid to use that word? I ask the commissioners and all the people who are listening to this presentation, it's going to take some kahunas to get this legislation passed by the House that we will be dealing with. And that's not an intellectual discussion. There are going to be things we're going to have to do to get the guys and ladies on the other side to understand what reasonableness is. And we need to be prepared to do that. I don't think action is used enough. That is where we take an action against a state house person, where we take an action against somebody. Now, we're never going to be able to raise as much money as they have. And forget that. That may be a tool we can use on the surface. But it's not the tool that we're going to use primarily. This, in my opinion, because what is going to happen around 2025 and 2050, when there's a major population shift in this country, is one of the most important redistricting efforts that will occur in this country during this time frame, and specifically in Ohio. Now, because of my tender age, I probably won't be here for the next round of fights about this stuff. So I'm giving all my gusto for this fight, and I'm gonna give it all I can give to get this thing done. Madam Chair and Co-Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sam Gresham. So glad you're here on this commission and in this fight. This is our chance, everyone. Does anyone have a question for Commissioner Gresham after that testimony?
Greg, you better ask me a question.
Sam, I was going to close out with you, so don't worry, it's coming. But let me.
It was kind of a mic drop, I would say. You got one. You got one, Greg.
No, Sam, you did such a great job with that, and you actually brought real what we're going through, what we're about to go through, and this is the kind of information you could only get from somebody who's been through the battle, like you have. And so we are so honored to have you on this panel because, you know, it's hard to say Northeast Ohio can get 2. If you're in Northeast Ohio without causing a major ruckus, or either say we can make something happen in Southwest Ohio. I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for that. And I hope you're around 10 years from now, because this is going to take more work than just drawing the lines over the next 90 days. We got to make sure these lines stick. We got to make sure people are continuously engaged in the process. So I want to save it for anybody else who has a question, but then I'll be glad to close down. when you're ready, co-chair.
I don't have a question, but I would say, Sam, you know, in our past work that we know that the average, we know people can live to be 120 years old, so you still got some time.
All right, if you, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
But I'll close with, you are dealing with the most evil political machine you have ever seen in your life. And they don't take prisoners. So just get ready for the war, y'all.
I would just encourage, I think we've heard some excellent speakers tonight, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, co-chairs, and I would just encourage each one of those individuals, once the dates are publicized for the public meetings, to make sure that they go, that they testify, that we are in the room, and that we talk about the issues that I mean, the environmental conversation that we had tonight was just absolutely amazing and outstanding, and has not been talked about enough, you know, and so I just hope that everyone that testified tonight, as well as those who've come before us for the other meetings, will also show up for the redistricting committee once they announce those meetings, that we're there and that we bring it and that we express our concerns, because I think we've just had some excellent speakers, and I'm just so proud. And thank you so much for the work that everyone on this commission has done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sykes, and also Commissioner Gresham. I think that's a great note for us to close on. And I can say how much I appreciate 10 years ago going through this, having Sam there, having him kind of show me the ropes, you too, Commissioner Sykes. And I didn't see Sam throw any rocks, but he was very powerful, like he was this evening, with his words and the fire that he holds inside him for this fight we're in, for fairness and for our values and everything we believe in. So thank you to both of you. I just want to flag, this is our last scheduled regional hearing. We will have additional dates to announce soon, now that we can evaluate the official process that's happening. The officers will be meeting and announcing the further work of the commission. So commission members and members of the public, please stay tuned for that information. I also want to flag for commissioners, we are not meeting after this meeting this evening. We will be meeting next Thursday at 5 o'clock. And that is a closed meeting among the commissioners. So stay tuned for the information for that. And want to conclude this hearing tonight, this set of regional hearings, and say thank you to all of you for attending. Thank you so much to our Vice Chair, Janice Brock, to our staff at the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, for all the work you're doing. And I want to turn it over to my esteemed co-chair, Greg Moore, to close us out this evening. Thanks so much, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Co-Chair Clyde, and also to all of our commissioners who've been with us this entire round. This was a journey that began in the early May, and we took it all the way to the middle of August. So thank you. Let me just close on just a few thoughts, because I know it's very late. The communities of interest came alive tonight more than ever before. Those people who've been sitting and thinking and trying to figure out how to make their voices heard, somehow tonight we heard a lot of it. And some of it was done in the chat. I know there was a question about the LGBTQI community of interest that we still have to answer. Are there actual maps being drawn there? Hearing that conversation about the Muslim community and how the proximity to the mosque makes such a big difference in how we think about how people can be represented just based on where their faith centers are located. We also heard something that moved me greatly. It was this environmental injustice community of interest, that who knew that you can find a Superfund site and create a community of interest. But until that came out tonight, it never would have crossed my mind. And I'm so glad that that happened tonight. I think when we started off, our vice chair gave us a summary of the data that's out. I know I've been on a number of calls today, And that data is going to be dissected at the next, I would say, 5 to 7 days. There's already a flood of articles out. It's going to say a lot about what happened to Ohio's population and where the shifts took place. Please keep your eyes on all of those articles. They're going to be important. Also, as Barbara Sykes mentioned, there are hearings that are going to start, and we really want people to be there at those hearings. We had a great turnout tonight, but we would love for people to continue to stay involved in those hearings. And hopefully that schedule will come out very soon. And we also know that the voting rights community, and I met Kathleen Clyde on the floor of the House in 2011 fighting that 194 battle with Jennifer Bruner. And that's how we started. It wasn't the beginning of the fight, but it was a victory over that through the voices of the people of the state of Ohio who signed petitions, just like they did on this issue, and turned that issue around for the legislature. So Sam, we can fight back, and we fought back and won. SB 5, I can go down the list. We've won some good battles in this state. And we were talking about how we did have speakers and both parties in the last 10 years. So it's doable. So thank you for all of this. Even Ellen's earlier statement, I forgot to mention about the role of money in politics, was our first hearing. So thank you again. I'm looking forward to the next several months, and I can't thank you all enough for what you've done to keep this issue alive. And have a great night. Thank you to our co-chair, Janice, Colleen, all the staff, and our new staff and new interns. We can't thank you enough. So have a good night. Thank you.